Hey, so I actually can't hear you, oddly enough. Um,
I tell you what,
there we are.
let me try that again. Bear with me here.
No, you're
Let me
good.
try. I think my mic was muted. All right, guys, let's try this again. Welcome to another episode of Future Stars Now. My name is Mike Freland. I think I was muted the whole time that I did my original introduction. Gosh, what an amateur, what a hack. Anyway, Future Stars Now is where we talk to all the upcoming stars and those making waves right now in professional wrestling. Tonight we got a great guest for us. It is Jaden Newman, 8-year pros, wrestled everywhere down in the South, including IWA Mid-South. Can't wait to hear some stories about that and working with Ian Rotten. Had some great matches on IWTV and cuts a damn good promo. I can tell you that doing my research. He definitely gets all of his emotions into it. So without further ado, we don't need to hear me talk. Let's go ahead and let's bring him in. Jaden Newman, welcome to the program, buddy.
Hey, thank you for having me. Good to finally hear you.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
in the world of podcasting, you're probably thinking, my God, they booked me, and this guy can't even turn on his microphone.
hey, no, look, I totally understand. I do my own podcast, and we've had technical difficulties, so you're completely okay. I got you.
So it's so exciting getting to talk to wrestlers from all over the country. And in the research I was doing before our interview tonight, I've seen that you've wrestled in a lot of different places, and you've been doing this for 8 years. And so I would say you are a seasoned veteran, if you will. Would you consider yourself that?
It's weird to say, but the more like people that meet me and like I tell them my experiences, they kind of say I am. So I guess I'm somewhat of a veteran now, a grizzled young vet, as they say. But yeah, it's crazy. It's been an amazing journey. It's going to be 9 years this August, so
Wow.
it's crazy. At the age of 23 to have all that experience, it's a blessing.
Yeah, I mean to break in the wrestling business so early, and we're going to get into that the early stages of what became your wrestling career in a few moments here. But first thing I always like to ask people is how are you dealing with now getting back into wrestling full swing because with COVID and everything, how did that impact your career? What were some things that you were able to do during that downtime, and how do you think you've emerged and changed ever since all of this?
So that's a really good question. And honestly, one of my favorite questions I get asked on podcast appearances because I actually didn't let off too much during the time away, per se, because in the South, a lot of shows were still running within the safe confines of COVID protocols. So I was still able to get my reps. I was still able to perform in front of crowds. Very thankful that there was a platform like IWTV that was really doing big with their live streams. So I was able to be on a bunch of those and still be seen by a lot of different eyes, even if it was only through their lens of their television at home. I was still able to entertain, and I was going stronger than ever. And I really think that the time during COVID, there were a couple pauses, but nothing really let up. But I feel like a lot of what I did during like the really heavy time of COVID helped build to what I'm doing now in a way. So honestly, it was a really it was really positive, and not positive as in a COVID test, like positive as in things that really impacted my career in a good way.
It's interesting. You mentioned IWTV, and since the formation of that, so many wrestlers have benefited from that. And it's so awesome because so many wrestling fans, depending on where you're located in the country, you may or may not be able to get out to certain shows. But with IWTV, it's almost like you got a front row seat in your living room to be able to catch so many different promotions, follow so many different stars that you might not have gotten a chance to follow if they weren't in your area. Talk a little bit about what that's like, getting featured with IWTV and how you feel like that platform has helped you expand and market yourself.
It's been great, obviously with the WWE network no longer being a thing, like you have a couple other wrestling streaming services out there, but IWTV to me is the number one. because they're consistently pushing live streams, consistently pushing new content, like IWTV branded content. Like they have things like the life of insert wrestler of the month. They have the masked wrestler. They have all sorts of different opportunities for you to showcase yourself and show people who you really are, like outside of the ring as well. And that's what makes IWTV such like a cool thing for professional wrestling. Obviously, with the multitude of live streams that are held, and the different promotions that are featured, it's the place to be. Like any show that is featured on IWTV is always going to be a goal of mine because that's where the eyes are, in my opinion. So if you're an independent wrestler, like IWTV, I think is definitely a goal to like consistently be on there to be featured.
When it comes to not only IWTV, but to branding yourself, I mean, you've been doing this for 8 years now. Talk about the luxuries, if you will, of being able to have the Twitter and the YouTube and the Facebook and all that kind of stuff, being able to help get more exposure with someone. I think that it's a big part of building a brand is being able to make sure that people have access to you all over the place. So you definitely utilize YouTube very, very well. Tell me a little bit about when you decided to start kind of putting yourself out there with YouTube.
So it really was more of a recent thing. I was told a long time ago that whenever you're in professional wrestling or just in general, like content creating, you're going to want to throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks. And I feel like that's all I really tried to do. Like if something doesn't work, all right, guess we're not going to do that again. And then if it does work, like we just stick with it and then we ride the course until it's time to do something new. That's basically the thing. Evolution is the game, because you can't sit there and do the same thing over and over and over and over. There has to be change. You have to adapt. And especially like this is going to sound weird saying, from the time I started to now, how much social media is a factor in like professional wrestling. Like just think about this. So AEW, right? CM Punk's return, a rumor, just a rumor that was utilized by social media. And we got the biggest return probably in professional wrestling history.
It sold out an entire venue just on rumor and speculation within a matter of minutes.
Yes, because of social media. Think about the age we're in. So, like, if you're not, like, as a professional wrestler, if you're not trying to consistently figure out how to maneuver and how to do it correctly, even though there is no right or wrong way, but definitely there's a correct way by, not being a piece of shit, lack of better terms. Be entertaining, find things that genuinely entertain you and do it. Because people, that's the big thing. People can tell if someone's ingenuine. I love doing the things I get to do. I love trying shit, and if it doesn't work, laughing about it because it's funny to me. Like that's the beauty of independent wrestling. It's the beauty of professional wrestling and content creating in general. Like if something doesn't work, oh man, that was a bad idea. Oh well, back on the horse, So it's really just like not being afraid to fail and doing what's natural to you. Like make it something that you actually would want to read, something that you would actually want to watch. Because if it's not, then why is anyone else going to want to watch it? Why is anyone else going to want to see it?
Very true. So in your prior life, before you got into professional wrestling, what was life like for you? Because let's take the hands of time and let's wind it back 8 years. What was the deciding factor at that moment in your life that you said, you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and give this pro wrestling thing a try. Was it a situation where there was just a chance encounter with somebody? Had it been something that you'd always wanted to do? Or was it something that, somebody introduced you and you thought, you know what the hell, let's give it a try?
So, like most people, I was a lifelong wrestling fan. I really remember discovering at the age of like 6. But I started going to independent wrestling shows at the age of 8 because my grandfather would take me to the flea market around here in Chattanooga, and we would always go to the booth, the wrestling booth. And I was allowed to get like 3 DVDs. That was always the thing because there was like a $5 bin. So like I would get like 3 DVDs, and from then I saw a Rey Mysterio DVD, and it was like his first WWE documentary, and it had the match with Eddie Guerrero on it. And I saw that, and I was like, man, like that's it. And that was like what made me go at the age of 8, like, this is what I want to do. So then, because of going to the wrestling booth every single weekend just to like be around wrestling, I ended up discovering that there were shows in the area. So then I started going to said shows, and I went to those shows for like 2 years. And once I turned like 10, I asked how I could be a professional wrestler. And they were like, well, you're obviously too young, but like, I'll tell you what. And it was obviously a way for them to be like, let's see if you actually want to do this. They're like, well, if you turn 14 and like you get a parent's like consent and they can sign a waiver and yada, 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 like you're willing to wait, we'll train you at the age of 14. All right. So in that downtime, because I wanted to at least do something to stay active and get ready, my family enrolled me into breakdance and tumbling.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for about 3 years, and by no means am I a good dancer. I will never claim that. But it definitely taught me a lot about what my body could do and how it can move. And obviously, as a wrestler, super important. So then once it came time to like train, I was 14. I stopped breakdance and tumbling, and I committed fully to wrestling. And it was from then on, like it was just full steam ahead, and that's really it. Like, that's my story.
That's incredible. I mean, the age of 14, that's super early. We've talked to some people who have started wrestling professionally when they were in high school as well. And they would say, they got a paper they have to write, and they're doing it backstage before they go out and have a match. And it's crazy to think that, but it's a new age right now where athletes are being groomed at a much earlier age. And to be 23 and have 8 years experience, I mean, most people haven't even broken into the business yet, and you have nearly a decade underneath you. What was it like when you decided to start training? What were those first early training sessions like, and who were the individuals who kind of took you under their wing?
So originally I was trained by, you're going to love this name. I was trained by the Nature Boy Paul Lee originally. And I wasn't there for very long. I was there for a year. And Paul, he taught me my fundamentals and such. But I got the shit beat out of me, I paid my dues. I got the shit beat out of me. And from then on, like, it didn't feel like a home. Like, I could tell, like, I just wasn't learning what I I felt what's to say the runt of the group.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on, like, I was told by people that were also like training there, like experienced wrestlers that were like, hey, like, he doesn't want to put his time into you, and you don't need to waste like any more time here if he doesn't want to teach you. So then they brought me to a guy named Chip Hazard, and I trained with him for a little bit. And then I got on a show called AWE a few years later, and I would then meet Carrie Awful. So Carrie Awful would then retrain me completely and make me the wrestler that I am today. So Carrie Awful, Nick Iggy, and Kevin Koo, those were the 3 guys that really took me under their wing and like taught me like right from wrong of professional wrestling, and like really showed me how things were properly done in between the ropes and outside of them as well. Like, they taught me how to be a man first and a wrestler second, but be the best I could be at both.
Wow. What was that like, having to hit the reset button? I mean, obviously you had certain understandings of different things, but when you got completely retrained, was it like, oh my gosh, that's the way that's supposed to go? Or did you say, oh, okay, I can make some minor tweaks, or was it completely 100% from ground zero, just completely all done new?
It was honestly, excuse me, it was honestly a mix of all of that, because like there were things that like I had taken from like what I had previously learned and I was able to apply it to what I was being taught. But then there was other things I was like, oh wow, I've been doing this wrong the whole time. So it was refreshing because like I'm very much like I love to learn, especially whenever it comes to like wrestling. Like I cannot get enough of it. And that's how I feel everyone should be. But it was a great experience for that reason of like knowing that like I was learning something new and I was honestly starting from ground zero per se, because then that meant that like I was able to like right the wrongs that like I was taught and become a better performer out of it. For most people, like where they're retrained, like because I got retrained I think at 5 years in with Carrie and them. So most people like at 5 years in like would not be probably so open to the idea of being told that like per se their shit doesn't stink,
Right.
or being told their shit stinks. But you know I was like I wanted to be told like that I needed work, because there's no such thing as perfection in professional wrestling. So anyone and anybody that could like give me any advice, like I would listen to it. And like Carrie and then they just like they sunk their claws into me, and then they had me like, and then I was their piece of clay to mold. And now like it is what it is. And now like I teach kids as well. So I run a school in Chattanooga called the TWE Performance Combine out of TWE Chattanooga. And a lot of like the things that they taught me, like I pass on to my kids. So it was really a good experience that, like I said, taught me a lot about not only myself, but like about who I am, like as a wrestler too, and like who I could be as a trainer, because I definitely want to be the best I can be when I'm teaching the new generation as well.
So when you went ahead and you completed your training and the powers that be determined you were ready for your first match, what how did that process evolve? Was it that you were booked through them, or that they, put your name in, and then how did that first match all come about?
So this is actually an interesting story. So my first match was at the place that I now train people at, TWE Chattanooga, which was opened originally by my grandfather. And he had decided that he was going to open TWE whilst I was training. And I had no clue that this was even an idea of his. He had not had a wrestling background whatsoever. He had been around it because of me. But he had seen all these talents in our area that were just like not getting the opportunities that he felt they deserved, and like weren't like being able to find a proper place to like go learn and get reps. So he wanted to create a place for like the future of our area. With that being said, then he started working on our venue, and next thing I know, I was being told that TWE is now a thing, and that this is our home. And I was like, what? Like, and it was something I never asked for. And for some reason, that's like what a lot of people think was like, oh, like Jaden was just handed a wrestling show by his grandfather. And that's not the case whatsoever. Like, I had no clue. I actually told him, I was like, I'm going to get my ass beat for this. And I did for many years. A lot of people didn't respect me because they felt like I was just a young kid that was handed everything. But, how could I be handed something whenever I didn't even ask for it? Like, it just was something that was like so weird that it happened, but like I'm kind of glad it did, because under that facility, like I am able to like do the things I get to do now. Like I've taken over full responsibility of the building and like training and just everything. And I had to grow up fast in the business, because then I had to learn like the business side of things as well. So it was honestly a blessing. But going back to my first match, that's where I had it. And I had it against a guy named Chris Crunk, who was an old tag partner of mine, and was also one of my first early mentors. Don't know if I can say it now considering he got a little heat on Twitter the other day. But he but yeah, I had my first match against him, and it was awesome because obviously it's your first match. You're never gonna get another first match. Uh so for what the moment was, I was very happy with it. Going back now, I would probably cringe, but I would never forget the emotions that I felt knowing that I got to debut in front of my friends, my family, and, make new fans that would grow on to still be fans of mine now. So, can't get any better than that, honestly.
No, definitely not. What was some feedback that you got after your first match?
I can't remember because there was so much. I was, and obviously, whenever you first start, most people aren't very good, and wrestling was something that it took a second for me to really grasp and learn how to work. So, I was given a lot of feedback. The thing that helped me the most, I think, whenever I first started was that I had a character. So my first character in professional wrestling was the party starter, Jaden Newman. It absolutely makes me sick to my stomach now when I think about it. But that's what I was. I came out and I had these little rave fluffy boots, and I came out to LMFAO, and I was gyrating my hips at a young age that could have easily put in some people in jail probably. But it is what it is. But it taught me a lot of how to play a character first, and then also learn to wrestle in the process, because now I have to wrestle around who I'm trying to portray. So it helped a lot in that aspect.
So you're going around and you've had your first match and now you're starting to hit the road. Who were some people that early on in your career you started to strike up some good friendships with, and that you started to get a bond with? Because we've always heard that early on in careers, some of the people that you come up with, they end up kind of becoming relationships that you foster for years to come. Was there anybody that you really gravitated to early on that you kind of latched onto and maybe started traveling with the different shows?
Yeah, so there was a guy, he passed away recently, God rest his soul. His name was Drew Game, and he was one of my favorite wrestlers from whenever I was a kid. So whenever I debuted, he started wrestling at TWE, and he was around. It was my first program I got to work. So with him, after we had done our program, he wanted to take me on the road. So he took me under his wing and drove me pretty much all over the Southeast, and we would just wrestle in at different shows. We would go, one time we did this triple shot, I remember, and it was South Pittsburgh, Rossville, Georgia, and then Red Bank, Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
And we did a match at all three places, and he taught me a lot about the business as well, but he also was a father figure to me, and he's someone that really meant a lot to me, not only as a wrestler but as a person, because I know I could call him even if it didn't have to do with wrestling, and he would pick up his phone and be there in a heartbeat. So I miss him every day, and without him, I wouldn't have learned the fun side of the business, and that it's not all just bad people.
I feel like in a lot of times wrestling does get kind of a bad rap because there's always this stigma of, watch out for these people or watch out for this person. But it's so refreshing to hear people say, you know what, that's not necessarily the case all the time and everywhere. Let me ask you this. Is there any promotions that you've worked with so far that just, you mentioned, feel like home? Is there any promotions that you just really get excited when you're going back to? Is there any certain area that you like to return to?
Yeah, so there's actually three. Obviously, TWE Chattanooga is home. That's home base for me. But I always say Action Wrestling, Southern Underground Pro, which I'm the current champion of right now, and the Scenic City Invitational promotion. Because those places are where I feel I really grew as a wrestler and got to come into my own. Southern Underground Pro especially feels like such a home to me because that was where I got to, meet my wife's side of the family for the first time. It's where I got to propose to my wife. So it holds a very special meaning to me to go to the Basement East in Nashville, Tennessee, because of all the memories I've had the chance to create. And because it's another place I just got to grow. I was supposed to be on the first show that they ever had, but I was too young. I couldn't even get in the first venue that they were going to run.
Oh,
so,
wow.
It's awesome now to think that I'm able to represent them, and I'm able to go back, and I'm able to just feel at home and just be excited to be amongst people that I trust, because trust is super important in professional wrestling. Like you said, it's refreshing to know that there are good sides to professional wrestling, even though it gets a bad rap. I promise there's good people out there. You just got to find them.
So early on in your career, obviously, you're working different venues, different shows, different promotions, locker rooms. I know they probably vary from promotion to promotion, depending on who's running it or whatnot. What are some interesting stories that you have from just being in locker rooms early on in your career? Did your trainers ever go over, hey, this is what you probably should do as a rookie, this is what you shouldn't do? Anything interesting like that you might want to share with us?
Not really. They gave me the proper etiquette of make sure you shake hands, say hello, be genuine, but nothing really that sticks out to me as far as they were don't do this, don't do that. Whenever I first started, I was told whenever you go to a show, you stay from the first match to the main event, and then you leave. Obviously over the years, things change, but I still try to do that as much as I can because it's like a respect thing to the show. And I genuinely just love wrestling, so I want to watch a show in its entirety. So there's that. Otherwise, no, there's nothing really crazy I can think of that has happened in locker rooms. I mean, most locker rooms that I've been in have been super supportive. They push each other, and that's how it should be. I get so sick and tired of going to some shows and the locker room's just hostile, and it's straight up everyone's trying to worry about who's going to take their spot, and it's guys, let's just not worry about that. Let's go out there and give 110%, and let's make the show as a whole better instead of worrying just about our one thing we have to do. Let those one things that we're doing add up in the macro view to make the show better and to make grand morale better. I don't know. Just get rid of the egos.
No, it completely makes sense. We've heard a lot of people say that it is difficult because, wrestling is a very territorial thing. Everybody is concerned about how they're going to be presented, or, someone outshine them, or the match ahead of them. They're, you shouldn't have done this. You shouldn't have done that. I was planning on doing that. Is there any situations like that when you're on a card where, it's just kind of openly discussed, okay, this is what we're going to be doing, or someone says, well, this is what we're going to do in the main event, try not to use this spot? Or is it basically just, hey, everybody kind of go out there and just do whatever you have laid out?
It really depends. I mean, obviously you don't want to take away from the main event, and you want to be respectful to what they're going to do, because you don't want to take away from the story that they're trying to tell. It really depends on the story that's needing to be told for what match you have, because at the end of the day, that's the thing that's important. So in some locker rooms, yeah, it's go do whatever you want to do. Other locker rooms, it's, hey, these are chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So it really just depends. I know that with my matches, I try to, as much as possible, stray away from what they're going to do in the main event or what other matches on the card are going to try and do, because I want to figure out how I'm going to let mine stick out. I don't want, like, there can be some similarities. That's fine. It's professional wrestling. We're not going to reinvent the wheel here. But I want to find ways that I'm able to make my match stick out so that way whenever people leave, they go, wow, that was a good show. But that Jaden Newman match was wild. Like, even if it's just that one moment, like, or whatever it may be, I want them to leave talking about my match. And then thinking about how, in the grand scheme of things, like from that match to a couple shows later, how it impacted the story we're trying to tell.
Have you ever had a situation where we've heard many different wrestlers make a comment that maybe if they're not on a show, but they're riding with people who are on the show, they'll make sure they bring their gear with them? It's always a make sure you have your gear no matter what, and then just kind of see if anybody needs you to, fill in or anything like that. Have you ever had a situation before where you might have been in the car with somebody and traveling, and maybe you're not booked, but you still have your gear and you're ready to go?
Oh, 100%. Best example of this, too, was NGW, based out of Knoxville, Tennessee now, but they were running in Newport, Tennessee for the longest. Big company down this way. Myself and now Nathan Frazier in the WWE and NXT UK, we showed up to a show in Knoxville that they were doing, and we literally just helped set up a ring. And they told us, like, hey, like, because y'all set up a ring, would y'all like a spot in the Battle Royal that we're going to be doing? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So me and Ben, we had our gear. Luckily, we set up the ring and we got in, and we really stood out because we were trying to do things from the norm of a punch and kick. We were doing character work, and we were really trying to like make ourselves like stand out in a way like that, as opposed to like trying to do something crazy. It's also super dangerous, can hurt everyone else in the match. So yeah, no, there's definitely been situations to where just having your gear in the car, even if you're not booked, has paid off and will pay off still to this day. It's a little bit harder now, but it can happen still.
Yeah, we've had a lot of people mention that, and I just find it to be so. It's shows how badly people want it,
Yes.
and it shows the dedication and the level of commitment. And hey, can I set up chairs? Hey, can I do this? Like you said before, hey, can I go ahead and help put up the ring? Because you're leaving these impressions on promoters that even if they don't have a spot for you, man, you know what? That Jaden Newman really left a really good feeling with me, and I got his contact information now. And look, this could be another place where, another territory you can go through and make money. And it's those small
Yeah.
things that I think you'd agree in the long run, they go really, really far.
Yeah, and that was the thing too, like, even after that show, like, Ben had to go back to campus because he was over in the States on a soccer scholarship. So he had to get back to campus because he had like a test the next day or something. But like, it was myself and the promoter of the show literally just taking down the ring afterwards.
Wow.
And because of that, like, I ended up having a spot with them for a while. And that's a thing too, is like, if you're like a wrestler, like you're a talent that's wanting on a show and like you're offering your services to come help out, like, actually do it. Because you'll have people all the time, they'll be like, hi, like, I want to come hang out, I want to come do this, I want to help set up chairs, I want to do whatever. But then like you look and like you see where they are, they're off standing in a corner, or they found somebody to talk to, and it's like, that's cool. Talk to your friends. Like, if you know people there, by all means, I'm not telling you to be, just off in a corner by yourself, but don't be off in a corner, not willing to work on a show that, you're trying to get on. Like, that's your first impression, like we said. So you want to make sure that you're able to stand out in all ways, including outside the ring. Because let me tell you something. In professional wrestling, what we do outside of the ring affects more than what we do inside.
Well, it's interesting you had mentioned before when we were talking about social media, and some people can get heat,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's just the way, that's the nature of the beast. And it's funny because I'm a big football fan, and they often tell people, before the draft, think before you hit send. And would you agree that despite how you may feel about certain topics, or whether somebody says something or not, might hold back on that reply just because once something's out there, it's always out there.
Yep.
And when you're building a brand, and especially trying to get your name and build the confidence from the promoters, you don't want to give anybody a reason to throw stones. And you just want to try to keep as neutral as you can and just try to stay as positive as you can.
Oh, 100%. You know, there's just some things that you don't need to talk about on social media. Um, but like if that's your hill to die on, by all means, like I'm not gonna judge you. But like I just know what I try to avoid to stay away from on social media, because I want to be all inclusive to my fans. I want to be all inclusive to any friends that I could potentially make as well. I want to be all inclusive to promoters that potentially want to hire me to work, because I don't want to, seclude myself from a target audience by any means. Like I want to make sure that I don't offend anyone. I want everyone to know that they are welcome to talk to me or have a conversation with me, and that they won't be judged. Like that's just a big thing for me. Like I'm very much a judgment-free kind of person who will stand up for what's right when it calls for it. But um whenever it comes to like things like you said, like topics that can get brought up on social media, like for the most part you will not see me commenting on it, because that's just like, that's not, people follow me to see wrestling.
Right.
I'm a character, so I'm gonna give them who I am.
In wrestling, and I don't want you to tell me any financial details, but just kind of curious, just so our listeners can know. In the early stages of wrestling, we've heard sometimes there is no payoff; it's just for the experience. And we've heard sometimes, you'll get some extra food from the concession, or sometimes people get lucky if they do get paid. As you go along, for anybody listening to this, is $25 kind of, we've heard this a lot from people, 25, 50, or would you say, what, depends on the promotion?
That's a good question. I mean, I definitely believe that you should be, if you are taking a bump in a ring, that you should be compensated. I do believe in that. um But man, it really depends. It really depends. And not even on a matter of like the promotion, because of like legacy bookings or anything like that. But it really depends. Like, because, you obviously hear it whenever you first start. Oh, like you maybe get something from the concession or whatever, yada, yada, yada. But, you know, like to get $25 whenever you're first starting is like awesome. If you're getting like 50 to 100 when you're first starting, my God, like, if I would have got that whenever I was just starting, I would have thought I was rich. But no, like it really depends. I like to think of it like over time, like it's almost like building value. It's like a piggy bank, right? So early on, like you get like little bit, little bit, little bit. Over time, it starts to gradually build, 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 and then you start making what is considered your worth, or what people will then see as your worth. Now, I definitely think that like if you are taking like if you are wrestling for a certain amount of money, and like that's the agreed price, you know, that's fine. And then if you want to revisit that behind closed doors, do that. That's completely okay. And you are entitled to do that. We shouldn't just have to take what we're offered and given. Like, we should value ourselves as professional wrestlers, because that's the first word, is professional. Like, this is a profession. So treat it as such. And, have respect for yourself as a professional wrestler, as an entertainer, to know to know your worth and know when it's time to have those talks. And it's a hard thing to do sometimes. I will say that. Like, I'm a very anxious person, so those talks can be scary, but you have to have them. It's a part
Right.
of it.
Speaking of that, it's difficult when you have to not only make sure you're making something, but there's gas, there's food. If you
Yep.
have to spend the night somewhere, you might be splitting stuff with people, and you obviously want to carry your own weight when it comes to the group that you're staying with. But let me ask you also this: when it comes to getting gear, whether it's singlets, tights, boots, all that kind of stuff, who is the individual? Maybe it was your trainers, or maybe it was somebody else that said, "Hey, you know what? You need to talk to such and such. This is where you can get wrestling gear." I mean, because as we know, it's not something that's obviously readily available down the street. You
Yeah.
either have to know somebody, or there's connections to make. So how did you get your first set of gear, and is it the same person you continue to go back to, or how does that work for you?
That's actually funny you said it's not readily down the street, because my gear maker actually lives down the street from me. So that's very funny that you said that. Who is one of my, gear makers that has been making gear for me since pretty much I started getting custom gear. But no, my trainers didn't tell me how to get gear. It was just like, so for my first match, I was gonna wear like volleyball shorts or something, because like I had no way of how you got gear. Like, that was a foreign concept to me. But obviously, like, I had discovered like online just by looking up wrestling gear that there was websites like High Spots, eLucha, and I didn't have enough money at the time. Obviously, at 14 years old, so I was just like, oh, like, I'll go to Academy and I'll get like these volleyball compression shorts. And someone at the show was like, nope, not doing that. And they just like gave me a pair of red trunks with a spider web on the butt. And I was like, that's cool. I guess I now wear trunks. So I never kind of went back from that. But then
Here we
later I would
go.
discover like on Facebook that, there were custom gear makers. So I had then reached out to a woman in Florida who had made me my first set of gear. And wasn't the best, but it was custom. It was mine, and I saved up for it. So it really meant a lot to me. And then after that, I would venture out and I would try different gear makers until I finally found the one who, oddly enough, lives right down the road from me. And, he would go on to make my gear. And what's funny now is he actually works with AEW, I believe. So, he's really top class in making gear. But I also will work with other people whenever I have the chance. Like, there's another guy I work with. His name's Tyler Thorne. Pro Wrestling Gear, I believe, is Pro Wrestling Wear is the name of his company. And like, he makes gear for like Chris Bay. He made Steve Carino's gear for his return. Like, he does some really good stuff, and he's a good friend of mine as well. So I try to, like, whenever it comes to gear makers, like, keep it like relatively like within a close circle of like people of like, hey, like, have you used this person before? Is he reliable? What's the turnaround rate? Because like, that stuff's super important, because there are a lot of good gear makers out there, but there's also a lot of really, really inconsistent ones. So I always want to make sure that I'm working with the absolute best. And right now I am. So I'm super thankful for that.
The other thing we hear a lot from wrestlers is, please wash your gear. We've had
Yes.
many wrestlers comment on, you know what, people don't want to work with people who smell. Please have
Yep.
good hygiene. Please make sure that you clean your gear. And there was a story that we had heard that somebody had wrestled, and I don't know if it was a Friday or Saturday night, and they didn't have a gig till the following weekend. So they threw all their stuff in their gym bag, and it was the dead of summer, and they just threw it in the trunk. And they went for their next booking. They pulled it out, and it reeked. And hey, the show goes on. You got to put it on. But their opponent literally was grossed out and pissed off. And that individual said, I got a pretty good laying them in pretty hard. Just as a reminder, please, please, please make sure you, in between matches, you wash your stuff. Have you ever come across any stories about washing your gear? Or has anybody ever told you, hey, FYI, please make sure that you wash your gear. Was that something that you just thought that's just common sense?
It's kind of common sense, but learning how to properly wash your gear is also important. A lot of people make the mistake of just throwing it in the washer and the dryer, but like over time that can like really mess up the materials of like spandex. So the best thing that I can recommend for anyone out there that needs to wash their gear, especially like with knee pads. Like knee pads are probably one of the stinkiest things that we have, and it's not even like meant, like it's not something we like do intentionally, but it just happens, especially like with AMA knee pads. So what I recommend doing with those is you can put them in the freezer and you can kill the odor like that. And then you can do that probably about 2 times. And then after every third time you wear them, you need to wash them in the sink. A mixture of hot and cold water, 50-50. Use some Woolite, really get in there good. And then you're going to rinse it, and then you're going to let it air dry. Because you have just so much air. You have so many things that can go wrong if you put it in a washer and a dryer. So hand wash, air dry, air dry, air dry.
Great advice right there. So any aspiring wrestlers, or you're just getting into the business, please make sure you listen to this episode, because these are tips and tricks that I think you'd agree you learn as you go. There's so many things that you can be trained and you can talk, to other people about, but you would agree on the job training with many occupations is mainly the way it is. You might not even realize you come across a situation like this until it actually happens to you.
Oh, 100%. Like, I've been in like locker rooms with people who've been there where their gear stank, and like sometimes like it's unintentional. Like they really sometimes like you've washed your gear and like you didn't have enough time for it to air dry, or didn't air dry like you wanted it to, and like your gear's kind of damp and it has like that damp, like somewhat smell, and it's like, yeah, and you're just like, oh, come on, and you're like, buddy, like Febreze is a thing.
Yes.
It's okay to Febreze. Like, we appreciate you trying, So there's that,
You've been in different promotions, especially across the South. And one thing that I find very interesting, it has become a lot more popular in recent years. And it's the hardcore wrestling. It's the violent wrestling. It's the blading. It's the chairs, the light tubes, all that kind of stuff. What's your thoughts on that? Have you ever been in a promotion where that's been something that's been brought up to you? Obviously we've seen Joey Janela go off the top of a roof with John Zandig and then go in the back of a pickup truck, which once again, I don't endorse anything like this because life can change in the blink of an eye. But how far would you be willing to go when it comes to, per se, hardcore matches or violent matches?
So I have a very big respect for hardcore wrestling and deathmatch wrestling in general. I actually was in my first deathmatch this past weekend for ICW No Holds Barred in the Pit Fighter X, and it is a completely different animal than a regular wrestling match. But there's an art form to it, and there's an appreciation that I have so much for it because of like just how serious the implications can be if you do one wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
So really, like, is it dangerous? Yes, but it's like a rush. And after this past weekend, like, I've been asked, like, is it something I would do again? And my big thing is, I tell people, it depends on what the story calls for.
Sure.
The match I had recently was with Tank, and it was a legit, we had a 10-year beef, like, in real life, of like, he didn't respect me because he was someone that thought I was handed everything, but he was just someone that really didn't know my story or take the time to get to know me. It wasn't until recently that like we got to know each other and like really like understand each other. So to be able to then pay that off in a match like we had, you know, it bonds you closer. So it's something that isn't for everyone, I understand. However, you should at least have a respect for it because those guys put their bodies on the line, especially in the COVID era. It became so popular. You know, that was like what was really like ruling the live streams so much during like COVID. So, you know, companies like ICW, GCW, um, Zona down in Mexico, like there's a bunch of different deathmatch companies that were just like really killing it at that time. And you know, for a reason, because it's entertaining, it's art. It's just another form of art, and art is subjective. So if you don't like it, that's fine. Flavors of the ice cream.
Yeah, no, I absolutely 100%, because I feel like a lot of people knock different styles of wrestling, and I feel like it's not right, because you can't necessarily say your preference is better or
No,
that is the way wrestling should be, because there's a lot of different performers out there. There's a lot of different styles out there. There are things that get over with crowds in certain parts of the country that don't with other parts of the country.
exactly.
So you really have to, from what I've learned, just as a podcaster and interviewer, is that you got to listen to what the audience wants you to go with. And if you don't, and you don't, like you said before, you have to adapt and evolve. If you don't do that, then I feel like you're limited to your range when it comes to performing. And you don't want to be pigeonholed into, well, this is just the one thing that I do. You want to at least branch out to see, you know what? If I can do XYZ, maybe this promoter who caught me on IWTV or caught my match on YouTube says, you know what, let me bring them in because they have a repertoire that is more abundant than just one style.
100%. Like it blows my mind. Like recently, like I was on Twitter, and sometimes you just got to put Twitter down. Like I'm gonna be real with you. You just got to sometimes put Twitter down because
Got to walk away from it.
you
Yep.
just got to walk away from social media. And that's another important thing too. I want to throw out there is just knowing when to walk away from it. Sometimes it's hard. Like my wife has to tell me all the time, Jaden, put down your phone. We're going to bed. But then like I just get wrapped up in it. Don't get so wrapped up in social media. We're all guilty of it. But going back to what I was saying, like I've been seeing like the comments about like the Minoru Suzuki Effie match that was announced.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like so weird to me that like people are like saying these negative things about like this match. And it's like, guys, how are y'all gonna shit on a match that hasn't happened yet? And two, you don't even know like what is gonna be brought stylistically. Like you're just assuming you know what Effie's gonna do in this situation. Like, and Effie for me is really one of the most influential wrestlers of our era as far as independent wrestling goes. Like how like in the early 2000s we had say like, you know, Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, John Moxley, all those guys. Like I feel like he's very much that to like our generation of independent wrestling because he has done it his own way and he's found what works for him and he's found ways to evolve and adapt like we're talking about. You know, he can do comedy, but he's not just comedy. You know, Effie's whatever the hell Effie wants to be. You know,
Well, it sells tickets.
exactly.
It
And
sells
that's the
pay-per-view
most
buys.
important thing.
I mean, I think you would agree, no matter what style it is, if the building's filled, someone's doing something right,
Yep,
because if that wasn't the case, no one would be showing up.
exactly. Orange Cassidy is another example. You hear all the time people say stuff about Orange Cassidy. He may not be your flavor of ice cream, but he's pretty damn tasty to someone else.
Absolutely.
And he must be tasty enough for the line to be filled out the building with people with their hands in the pocket wearing sunglasses, you know? Like that's it.
It's so funny. There's people that will knock a wrestler, but then, the minute they go to a show, they're marking out for them. And it's like, wait a minute, hold on. You were just saying yada, yada, yada on social media. But people talk out of both sides of their mouth, no matter what the topic may be.
Oh, 100%. And like it's so funny like you see like what you just said like for example, like you see that a lot whenever people go and get signed or like they go and move on to like a big indie promotion. Like that's where it really starts to become more prevalent. is because like they talked all that hot shit whenever they're on the indies and they weren't doing that big of stuff. But then like whenever they get on these bigger indies and like they get signed to a company, then they're like, oh my God, like we were with you the whole time. And it's like, no, you weren't. Like, you were affecting my mental health by some of the things you said. Now you want to like, and now you like, now that's not everyone, may I say, but like, obviously we know that social media can be very toxic, which is why I'm so thankful that we can mute words and we can like block accounts, say what you want. Like I've heard people sit there and be like, oh, well, you're a bitch if you block accounts. I don't care. I want to do what's best for me at the end of the day.
I agree. Well, I tell you what, we are running low here on time, but the one thing I do want to do, there's a couple things. The first thing I want to do is go ahead and promote. You have a store at Pro Wrestling Tees.
Yep.
Let people know where they can get your merchandise, your social media accounts, how they can follow you, where you're going to be appearing next. Give us all the details so we can find out what's next with Jaden Newman.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I have a Pro Wrestling Tees. You can find that at prowrestlingtees.com/Jaden Newman. I also have a TeePublic account. So you can go on there. It's TeePublic/user/Jaden for real. And then for social media, you can find me on Twitter at Jaden for real. You can find me on Instagram at Jaden1Newman. That's JADEN 1 Newman, JADEN number 4 real for Twitter. And I promise I am not a female basketball player. I am a professional wrestler. Don't get it twisted. So with that as well, you can find me on TikTok. I post on there occasionally. YouTube, I'm on there. And as far as my upcoming events, this Thursday, I'll be making my debut for Beyond Wrestling at Wrestling Open versus the prize, Alec Price, for the Southern Underground Pro Bone Storm Championship. My first time defending, and I'm very excited for that. See here, Friday I will be at Pro Wrestling Grind. I will not be wrestling Matt Mikowski like originally planned. Card's subject to change, but he has just announced that he is injured, so pray for him. Speedy recovery to him. I hate that he's out. I was very excited for the match, but you know what? Whenever he gets better, we will run that back. And then on Saturday, you can find me right back in the old TriStar State, Tennessee, in La Follette, Tennessee, for Southern Pride Championship Wrestling. And then at the end of the month, on March 26th, I will be wrestling Brutal Bob Evans in an Ironman match, a 60-minute Ironman match at TWE Chattanooga in Red Bank, Tennessee.
So if people want to book you, what is the best way if they're listening to this and they say, I want to book Jaden Newman? What's the best way to reach out to you? DM or email or?
Yeah, you can reach out to me in my DMs, or if you want to, you can email me at jadennewmanbookings@gmail.com.
Beautiful. Jaden, it has been so much fun, and there's so much more meat on the bone. So many more things I feel like we can talk about. Is there any chance that I can twist your arm to come back and we can do another part 2?
Hey, start twisting. I'm down to come back anytime.
That's fantastic. Jaden, thank you so much. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Same to you, my man.
Thanks. All right, guys, that's Jaden Newman. Great interview. So honest and frank and sincere about not only his passion for wrestling, but his drive and who's inspired him. And I loved hearing the story about the Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio bargain bin with the DVDs, and how he's been training, and now he's training other people as well. And just the etiquette, the locker room etiquette, and definitely clean your gear. And he gave us some great tips about that as well. Definitely woolite and make sure you air dry. I just love, and I'm so fortunate to be able to talk to these wrestlers, because these are the people that are going to be headlining pay-per-views for the next 20, 30 years. And to be able to get on the ground floor and talk to them and see them succeed is a blessing for me, because I'm just sitting out in a chair and just holding the microphone. But they're the ones who make memories and who definitely make this business what it is today. So once again, thank you to Jaden Newman. Please make sure you follow him on all his social media accounts. Go ahead and purchase his merchandise as well. And that's the big thing too. You love wrestling, support independent wrestlers. Support them. I cannot say it enough. Buy a t-shirt. If you're at a show, go up to their table, shake their hand, let them know how much that you appreciate them. All right, guys, that is going to do it for Future Stars Now. It has been fun. Once again, my name is Mike Freland. Don't forget, each and every Friday, Front Row Material podcast. And Future Stars Now, the audio version, drops on all major forms of podcasting. And go ahead and subscribe to our Twitter account and follow our Twitch account, which is twitch.tv/FRM pod. All right. I'm winded. I need something to drink, but this has been fun. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll catch you next time on Future Stars Now.